Okay, so today, I'm just gonna do like an introduction training on GTOWizard. Just kind of want to give you guys a feel for the type of training and studying that I do and that I could do with you guys. And all it takes is just to buy a little bit of action. Obviously, any amount helps, as little as $10, which is less than 1% of my action, would go a long way for you because then you would get to study all of these spots with me and you'd get to follow along and study my hands. As you'll see, I've been doing some pretty rigorous studying on some pretty weird boards and some pretty weird scenarios. And so this is actually a spot that I played in a cash game earlier where I thought my opponent was calling wide, but he actually made a pretty nice call with Queen Jack offsuit in this spot. Um, I basically um, check raised the turn on the three of clubs turn, and he called, and the river went check check. But I check raised for $100 on this turn, and he called, and I thought with Queen Jack off, I'm like, man, that's a wide call, and then I ran it through the solver, and I'm like, no, it's a pretty good call. And so spots like that, you'll see um, a lot of really useful study spots in cash, mainly tournaments, obviously, because I'm gonna be studying tournaments and I have the tournament subscription. But the good news is, if you really want to study cash game spots, just set the stack to 100 big blinds, and it's practically the same. You can study pretty much any spot, and it's going to be very similar. Cash games and tournaments are going to be very similar, as you can see. I mean, if we go cash and classic, it's 100 big blinds. There's a slight difference in this is 6 max. Let's go 9 max. Obviously, you're going to be raising tighter in cash just because of the rake structure, but for the most part, it's very similar, especially in terms of like if you're playing home games or online, you can get away with opening this wide in most of those formats. And so obviously you can apply some stuff that you learn from this to your cash game without just saying, oh, this is the Bible, I'm always gonna raise this exact range, and I'm gonna raise Queen 10 off under the gun 20% of the time. Like you don't have to get that into the details, but it is important to understand certain spots and how they do apply to different scenarios that you'll encounter in your games. And so the first thing I want to mention is just the volume of content that you can consume from these training sessions, and the resources that I'm going to provide to you guys to help you learn independently. So instead of just making hour-long training videos all the time, which I could do, but I won't do very often, I'm going to give you guys the tools to study on your own. And so I'm going to be going over a lot of these blog posts on GTOWizard where there's a lot of useful information, but some of it might be hard to understand. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and explain that to you guys and help you understand and digest everything that you see in these blog posts and pretty much everywhere. Like, let's go to this one right here, for example. Understanding bubble factor is really complicated, and obviously there's a lot of depth to it. Like and understanding ICM and bubble factor. Bubble factor is a subcomponent of ICM implications, and so these these spots, especially in tournaments, matter a lot when you're on the bubble or just on the final table in general. ICM does impact your strategy heavily, and it's important to understand how it will affect your strategy. And so, looking at the strategy for button opens for the money bubble versus the final table bubble, the button can open literally twice as wide on the final table button versus on the money bubble. Um, just because the money bubble is so crucial, because your pay literally goes from 0x your buy-in to like 2.x or 1.8x your buy-in. So it's really really important to understand the differences in these spots and how they affect your play. And so a lot of people normally on the button in tournaments in a normal spot, like let's go back to solver land. You know, in a normal scenario, let's say you're on 25 big blinds 8-handed on the button, you're going to be raising or calling on the button almost 50% of hands, versus if we play on the bubble, whether it's the final table bubble or just the money bubble, you're going to be tightening that range significantly. I mean, even tightening a range 10% of the tightening a range 10% is a pretty tight adjustment. And so let's look at what the stack sizes are in the spot. Button has 10 big blinds, so 10 big blinds effective. The button is opening about 60% of hands with a lot of calls and a lot of folds. But in this spot, the bubble is pretty much jamming or raising their entire range. They don't have any calls. So basically this gets flipped over here and everything else stays about the same. They're folding a little more. They're folding a little more of their trash hands, like the 8-6 suited. And then they're just shifting their range more towards these stronger hands. I mean, they're going to be jamming all of their aces, and they're going to be jamming a lot of their king highs. Like you see here is a lot of king high jamming, pretty much pure jam in these spots. And then they're going to fold out a lot more of their queen X suiteds and their junky suited gappers and stuff like that, just because they don't do well as a shove, and you're not really going to be calling ever when you're in this position with 10 big blinds versus a bigger stack. And so here it doesn't change as much, but the money bubble, if we look at this range, that is super tight on 10 big blinds. So you're the short stack, which means that ICM implications don't affect you as much. So this is a short stack on the bubble, where for certain reasons short stacks are not affected as much by bubble factor overall, because especially if you're super short, like in this example where you have 10 big blinds and everyone else is almost either doubling your stack or more, with the exception of undergun and low jack. Everybody has a pretty decently sized stack. You're on 9 big blinds here, and so do we have a 9 big blind option? We do. So as you can see, opening super wide versus opening super tight. And really, you're raising these as traps, and then you have a few bluffs in here, but really you could get rid of these raised bluffs, because you just want to pure jam everything that's not the nuts, and then try to get value out of stuff that is the nuts. And that's a good adjustment to make, because a lot of people in these spots aren't going to say, oh, hey, he's only raising aces, and then fold. They're not going to realize that. Some thinking players might realize that, but even if you're never, like, if you go to showdown and you just raise aces and then jam everything else, even the most thinking players are still going to be like, oh, well, he raises aces, he might have some bluffs in there. There's no way for them to realize, unless they play a bunch of tournaments with you, to realize that you don't have a bluffing range. So a good adjustment would be to just cut out this raised bluff range entirely and just jam all of your hands that need protection, and then just raise a lot of your strongest hands to get value. Because, like, you don't want to be just flatting with eights here, or just raising with eights here, because if you raise and get called and then the flop comes king, queen, jack, you're in a terrible spot, because you just have to fold a fourth of your stack, or maybe even a third of your stack, depending on the raise size and whether you're on the big blind or whatever the implications are. It's just a terrible outcome for you because you just have to fold in that spot. In any spot, you have to fold that, and losing a third of your stack or a fourth of your stack is just an absolutely terrible outcome in any stage of a tournament, no matter what your stack is. Even if you're the chip leader, I mean, losing a fourth of your stack just isn't great for you. Obviously, it matters more if you're on 6 big blinds and you lose 2 big blinds. That's just awful. But I mean, even if you have 100 big blinds and you lose 40, that's still not an amazing outcome at all. And so you're just going to be jamming a lot of your low pocket pairs, a lot of your ace highs, because you're going to be getting called by a lot of worse hands. Like if you're on the button with 9 bigs and you raise, and you jam, the big blind is going to be calling you with a lot of queens, a lot of king X, a lot of king X suited, all of their pairs, obviously. Even hands like jack high, queen 10, queen jack, queen high. You're getting called by tons of hands that you have beat pre-flop. So that's why you're going to be jamming with all of your ace highs, or most of your ace highs, ace suited, because that gives you the most equity. Your good to medium ace X off, honestly, I would get rid of ace 5 off out of your range entirely, tighten it up even more, get rid of ace 5, ace 6, ace 7 even, and just jam ace 8 off plus. And then obviously ace 2 suited and up, I think you can just jam all of that. That's fine. And then 4s plus, you don't really want to be jamming 2s and 3s. You can if you really want to, but it's just not great because if you're getting called, you're always going to be flipping or worse. So just jamming 2s and 3s, and even jamming 4s is a little light, but at least if you jam 4s, you're going to be getting called by 3s and 2s, like all the time. But I mean, if you jam with 2s, you're going to be getting it in flipping or worse every time. There's no exception. And so taking 2s and 3s out of your range is wise. Taking 4s out of your range isn't a bad idea either. Solver likes to have it in, but I mean, as an adjustment, you could take 4s and even 5s out of your range, and then just jam 6s plus, ace 5 suited plus, or ace 4 suited sometimes, and then take these out of your range, and then you can be even tighter on the money bubble, because just being as tight as you can to make the money on a short stack is never a bad idea. Because even if you're the shortest stack at your table, it doesn't mean you're the shortest stack in your tournament. There might be another player on a different table who's sitting on 3 big blinds and he's going to be forced all in 2 orbits. And so being aware of that and playing tight is, a wise outcome. And you'll notice the bubble factor. This is just general bubble factor. General bubble factor. This is not even, this is average. This isn't even spread out over certain spots, because there are certain spots where the bubble factor can be 8% or higher. 8% or higher. Or not 8%, 8.0 or higher. I mean, there are bubble spots where, let's say, your opponent has, I don't know if I can do this in here, but let's say, let's change this to ICM. Under the gun has 8 big blinds, folding 90%. The button, with small blind and big blind covering, it's only opening 30% of hands. Instead of going ICM near bubble, let's do final table. Let's do final hand table. Let's go 4-handed, make it simple. Just scroll down here. And let's look at, I like this spot a lot. This spot a lot, where button has 30%. Look how wide the button gets to open versus how wide the cutoff gets to open. And then, let's say the button raises. Look how tight the small blind has to play. This is, look at, you're folding 90% of hands and limping you could take these out of your range and only limp or like jam with nines plus. There's a lot. It's just a lot of folding going on because the big blind has 5 big blinds, and he has to either call or jam so many hands, and you're going to be this. The big blind's gonna get busted out by the button here so often that even if the small blind had 25 big blinds, he's going to be folding a large majority of the time. And so it's important in these final table spots and in spots where the bubble factor is so high that you really just have to fold like a lot. If the cutoff jams and button rejams, look at how tight the small blind's playing. Only calling queens plus. Only calling queens plus. And if the small blind calls, this is what the big blind's doing. He's literally only playing with pocket aces. Because the chances of one of these people getting knocked out and him making a pay jump is so large that calling kings here would be a disaster. Pure fold kings, only calling aces. And honestly, if I was the big blind here, I think I might fold aces in this spot, genuinely. I might, if I'm the big blind, I might fold aces. I'd fold them face up. And the reason I would fold aces is because in this spot, let's say the cutoff and the small blind both get knocked out. And let's say I don't have all the fancy tools that all these guys have. But let's say it's $1,000 prize pool. Fifth gets paid 0, fourth gets paid 10, first gets paid 50, or no, let's say 40, 42.5, 40. Let's just say 42. And then second gets 28, and then it's 18 and 12. So if you are in the big blind here and you call with aces and get knocked out, you are last in chips, so this is your payout. You get 120. But if you fold pocket aces here and 2 players get knocked out, you're over 2xing your pay. Over 2x. And let's say it's like this up here where it's 40, 25, 15, 10, or 50, 25, 15, 10. Let's say it's like this. 2.5x your payout. Folding aces doesn't seem like such a bad idea here, because if both of these players get knocked out, it's a disaster. Now, to be fair, small blind is literally only calling queens plus, so there's a pretty strong chance that the small blind isn't going to get knocked out, but there's a very high chance that this guy gets knocked out. And if he gets knocked out, you get an extra $50. Which, if we put it in perspective of a World Series of Poker ring, that $50 becomes $5,000. Now that makes you realize how important these spots are and how much ICM pressure can play a big difference. Because let's say there's only $50,000 left in the prize pool. Obviously, you know, a lot of the prize pool is going to get eaten up here. But this is the remaining prize pool. It's 50K left. Half the field's already been paid out, and this is the distribution of the rest. You make an extra $2,500 here, almost guaranteed by folding pocket aces. Now, there is the benefit of calling, but if you really just want to lock up that extra $2,500, because like let's say, I mean, if you quadruple up, you're in a pretty good spot, because I'm gonna have to do some quick calculations. So you're gonna take away 5 big blinds from, okay, and then small blind is gonna have 9 times 3, 27, and then button is gonna lose So it's basically just going to be flipped. The button is going to be around 15 bigs. Small blind's going to be around 30. And then you're going to have 20. Yeah, button's going to have 15. Small blind's going to have 30, and you're going to have 20. So you're going to be in second place if you call here. I don't hate a call. It really could go either way. But you can see why folding kings here would be a disaster. Because if you call with kings and cutoff has ace-3 suited and he spikes an ace, you're beat. Or if button calls with pocket 10 or jams with pocket 10s and spikes a 10, there's a 20% chance that happens. There's a 30% chance an ace calls out. Small blind jams with queens. All of a sudden, your kings aren't looking so good. Let's put this in this spot just so you can get the exact numbers. You have kings. He's got ace-3. Button's got 10s. And this guy's got queens. You have a 42% chance to quadruple up. Which means you have a 60% chance of getting knocked out in 4th place and losing out on anywhere between $2,500 and $7,500. But if you have aces here, look at how the equity changes. You get that extra 10%, that can make it worth it because your chances of winning this tournament all of a sudden jump pretty high if you win this. You basically have a 50-50 chance to go from here to here or here. If you win this pot, you're almost never going to get third. So you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to lose $5,000 48% of the time in this exact scenario. But I'm going to win more than double 5K more than like the other half of the time, which makes it worth it in the long run to make this call. But kings folds there because it just doesn't have the equity to support itself. It can't stand on itself. So king's just folding. And by the way, this is button. So this guy's pretty much getting knocked out unless he spikes an 8 or a flush or an ace or a flush every time. And so let's say this guy spikes an ace and then queens hold. And you're still in 4th. Then, if the structure flips between you becoming this guy and you becoming this guy, because this is literally what's gonna like happen pretty much 2 hands later, is you're gonna be this guy. Then you can start raising all of these hands. You can say, you know, or really you're gonna have like you're still going to be on 5 bigs, but you're going to be this guy where you can fight for a ladder and you can fold and let's say button raises and small blind jams. He applies a lot of ICM pressure because, I mean, button is raising relatively tight. Look at how wide the small blind gets to jam here. Jamming 13% of hands, calling, and then raising. He does a lot of raising. But I mean, got a lot of jams here. 13% of the time, button's gonna get jammed on, and this is 2 hands later. Button's folding a lot big blind's folding a lot because he's not the button. But button, he finds a call 20% of the time, and even if he folds and gets knocked out, it's the end of the pot. But if he calls and he's up and he gets knocked out, I mean, the range, small blind is basically crushing, or, yeah. Button is crushing small blind is what I meant to say. Yeah, button is just absolutely crushing here. But you can see the amount of EV the small blind gains from jamming versus the amount the button gets from calling. It's because the ICM pressure is so large that even though button is calling with a super tight range, he really just hates getting it in with these. Like he hates getting in with ace jack, ace queen, ace king, nines, where he's going to be flipping a lot or a slight favorite and has a chance to get busted out in fourth when there's this short stack behind him. And that's why this range is so tight. So ICM matters a lot in tournaments, a lot. And so it can be really difficult to make some super tight folds. But I mean, I think this article explains that really well. I've already read this article, that's why I didn't go through and just, do a read along with you guys. But I mean, GTOWizard has so many good tools that you can use. I mean, there's so many articles, videos, and I mean, if we go on YouTube real quick, ignore my feed. Actually, I can just go straight to it, so you guys don't get to see what I watch on YouTube. Videos. If we go here.
If the warranty on the used car you're considering...
Is there no playlist? Oh yeah, let's go GTO. Playlists. Weekly coaching. There are 33 30-minute to hour-long videos that you can watch. There's over 25 hours of content in this playlist that you can consume, and that's going to make you a better player. And then if you go to my Spotify, I'm going to share with you guys my favorite Upswing poker podcasts. Because they have a good amount of these, but I mean, I have 10 that I've favorited. So you can go through and watch all of these videos. All of these videos are going to make you a better player in one way or another. I mean, early stage tournament strategy, just how to run deeper more often in a tournament, exploiting, different regs and bad recreational players, slow playing aces, pre-flop raise sizings, facing check raises, playing check raises, turn betting, so continuing after a continuation bet, or probe betting. I need to put the probe betting one on here too. Solver strategies, big blind defense, three betting. I mean, and there's tons more of just these super awesome resources that Upswing provides. They just have so many good podcasts that you can really, really learn a lot from. And I've basically made a collection of the best ones. This is another one. I've seen this one. Add it to this one and remove it from episodes. Okay. How to beat straddles. This is a super simple one because a lot of players over defend their straddles. So this is a really good one for um, home cash games because a lot of people just don't know how to play straddles properly, and so you can print money off of attacking their uncapped but weak range preflop because they put in extra money. Some people will straddle up to $5 every orbit, and you can attack that with marginal hands and just print money off of it. Tips for playing overpairs. This is another good one. I haven't even seen this one yet. This is a super good one. I watched this in my car on my way to Florida. This one's amazing. This is a really good quiz that's actually quite difficult that can be really good for just getting a deeper understanding of the game and how to bet size on different streets. By the way, I went 3 for 3. Not to brag, but I'm bragging. All right, this one's in my playlist. Tips for playing the river. This one is pretty good. If you struggle in river spots where you're going to be facing big bets and making decisions for a large amount of money, this one's really good for you. I'll throw it in there too because, I mean, this one is just super solid. This one it's okay. I mean, if you're interested in getting tricky with your pocket aces, which can be really good for exploiting certain opponents, it's a good one to watch. Suited connectors. This is a really good one if you're playing multi-way pots, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of your hand. That can be a really good one if you have trouble playing those suited connectors because it really tells you everything you need to know. Facing a check raise. This is really good if you're playing against me or another aggressive opponent that's gonna be check raising you a lot, this is a really good one to watch, and that one's in there. This one is really, really, really good. If you play heads up poker and you haven't heard of Doug Polk, you should definitely check him out in general. I mean, Doug Polk is a crusher. If I can type, jeez. This guy crushes. It's on YouTube, it's everywhere. I mean, this guy might be one of the best heads up player of all time. In 2013, he was the best heads up player of all time. And if you go here, Jungle Man, I'm sure you've heard of him. I've never heard of this guy. Button Clicker was a really, really good online reg. Linus, he's a current very strong player. And then Doug Polk is considered the #1 heads up player of all time. And he gives you a 30-minute guide to heads up poker. I actually probably need to watch that one too, because this guy is he's Jesus in heads up poker. He really is. He's the best heads up poker player of all time. There's no doubt. Multi-way pots, this is a really good one. And you can see how many of these are on here. Oh, I gotta go back down because I backed out. But you can see how many of these episodes can apply to the games that you play on a day-to-day basis, and how much these episodes can improve your game, because they do really give you some really good information. This paired flops one is great because it can tell you how to win a lot of small pots very consistently on paired flops, which come pretty often because a lot of opponents, especially, you know, not necessarily tight, but just bad recreational players, are going to be making a lot of bad decisions on these paired flops, which is going to lead to you making a lot more money off of them, because bad decisions on the flop lead to bad decisions on the turn and river, which just means to you snowballing your profits and making a lot more big blinds per hand and per hour on these paired boards. C-betting out of position's a pretty good one. Bounty tournament strategy. If you ever played bounty tournaments, that's a really good watch. I'm not going to add that to the playlist because it's very niche, but this is a good one. Ace King, I haven't seen this one, but a lot of players struggle to play Ace King properly. A lot of, recreational players or the regs at my home game will overplay Ace King a lot. They'll do a lot of, triple barrel bluffing with Ace King, even though it's really not a very good bluff candidate most of the time because it blocks. That's actually a fun fact. Ace King is not a good bluff candidate, and the #1 reason it's not a good bluff candidate is because it blocks a lot of hands that you want your opponent to fold. A lot of hands, or a lot of opponents, especially if they're solid opponents, but just in general, are going to call with a lot of ace high or maybe even king high on the flop, especially on certain board textures. And when you're bluffing, you want to get those ace highs and king highs that have equity against you to fold. But when you have ace king, you block ace and king high. You block king queen, king jack, king 10 that you want to get your opponent to fold on the flop and turn. You block ace 10, ace king, ace queen, ace jack, even ace 8, ace 7 that didn't hit a pair. You block a lot of those hands that you want to get your opponent to fold, and having the ace and the king can be really problematic. So a lot of times, a lot of, recreational players or, regulars even will misplay ace king and overplay it and bluff into the sun, into the abyss, and it's a big leak in a lot of players' games. That one I recommend to a lot of players, especially if you feel like you hate playing ace king, because a lot of players will say, "Oh, I hate ace king. Ace king sucks." It's a great, great resource if you're one of those players. Range betting, I'm not going to put on there. This is more of an advanced concept that honestly at home games isn't really going to apply very much. If you're playing against solid thinking opponents, range betting is definitely something you want to look into, and you can watch this, in your free time whenever you want. But, against just the average recreational player, range betting can actually be a disadvantage, because a lot of people aren't even going to know what a range is. They're just going to be like, "Oh, I have a pair of threes, I'm going to call." And even though the flop came down like king queen 3 and you have ace 10, and you bet, and they just call with their pair of threes, and then you check, and then they check, and then you brick out and you lose. I mean, a lot of people, or they might even call with like 8-7 suited and be like, "Oh, I got a gut shot," even though there's 2 overs and the board absolutely smashes your range. They're just going to be flat calling with those, and they're going to get there on you, and you're not going to see it coming. And that just happens. A lot of wrecks are gonna do that. You gotta know how to play around it. This is the one that I would recommend the most if you're playing tournaments and you struggle. This one is a super good watch. This one is another okay watch. It's very specific to the WSOP main event because that field is just different from so many other poker tournaments that it's very specific for the WSOP. So I wouldn't recommend giving this a watch unless you plan on playing specifically the WSOP main event, which is a $10,000 buy-in, freeze out. So I don't know if I would give that a watch. It might not be worth your time unless that's something you're interested in doing. Pre-flop small blind strategy. This can be a good one. If you tend to be sticky in the small blind because you already have that little bit invested, just know that you're probably overcalling a lot. So that could be a good watch if you feel like that might describe you. Crushing tournaments start to finish. This is a really good one. It says I haven't watched it, but I have. I know I have. This is a very, very good, just a very good podcast. I mean, it covers everything you need to know from 75% field to 25% field to money bubble to final table to heads up. I mean, this is one of the best podcasts for poker study that I've ever watched. So that one I highly recommend if you play tournaments. Ace high flops can be a really good one. When to bet big. I mean, you can literally scroll through this and just look at every single one and just go through and listen to everything that you think applies. I listened to this at work yesterday. That was a really good watch. Just, a lot of people will make a lot of big mistakes in 4-bet pots and 4-betting in general. A lot of players 4-bet too tight, and a lot of players even 3-bet too tight. And there's one on 3-betting down here too. Yeah, there it is. There's just so many good, and that's all of them. But I mean, that was probably 30 plus podcasts that you can, watch and use and gain an advantage on your opponents by having the knowledge of some of the tips and tricks that they will share in these podcasts. And this is 100% completely free, so I'm willing to share this with you guys. But I mean, in general, there's just so many good resources out there for you to study with. And I'm gonna put you on to all the free ones, and then I'm gonna help y'all um, deepen your knowledge of the game even more by going through study spots with you, individual hands, ICM, cash games, whatever. I'll help you just become a better player. And so, if that's something that interests you, buy buy some action and make some money with me. I mean, if you believe in me as a poker player and you believe in my ability to make money at the WSOP, buying action is a no-brainer because not only do you get all of these study tools and free unlimited access to this $90 subscription, um, starting at 69 a month, 89, yeah, 89 a month unless you play annually, and then it's 69 a month. But $90 subscription, you get free unlimited access to my subscription. Obviously, I'm not going to give you the password, but if you want to study any hands, if you want to run any practice or drills, I'll let you run that. If you want to do any study sessions with me on some pretty in-depth spots that this will allow me to analyze, then we can do that. And I mean, cost you as little as $5, $10, $25 just to buy a small percentage of my action. And I mean, chances are you're going to be making more than that back anyway. So you're basically getting money to get study tools and advance your poker game. I'm paying you guys, and all you're doing is helping me fund my WSOP experience, and I'm gonna make it worth your time either way. So why not? But anyways, yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed. Me going on a rant about a bunch of poker stuff that you can help study. If you ever have any questions on any of this stuff and you've bought action, I will happily explain away any questions you might have, any spots that you want me to study. I can go through in-depth analyses of. I've already done it for a couple people for free just to kind of show them what I do. But yeah, if that's something that interests you, just hit me up, send me a message, do whatever, and then we can work it out, and then you know you can have a piece of me in the WSOP and you can help me win a ring. So yeah.